Thanks everyone so much. I'm Amy and this is Simon, and we're so excited to be here with you for the lightning talk. Today we're presenting on a recently conducted case study where we explored how UDL implementation in practice-based social work courses impacted student learning outcomes and experiences. So we'll explain a little bit about how we integrated UDL into the design and delivery of the course, and also present some various evaluation strategies for assessing the implementation. So we want to extend our thanks to CITL because this work was funded through a teaching enhancement through scholarly inquiry grant, and also to Drs. James Basham and Jim Gardner at the University of Kansas because they granted us permission to use their UDL observation measurement tool. So the course we're talking about today is called Social Work Knowledge and Skills for Practice with Families, and it prepares students to offer direct services to families through increasing their knowledge of family functioning and their competence in family assessment and intervention. It is a required fourth-year course in the Bachelor of Social Work program, and it's typically taught in the fall semester. So the course, as we can see here on the right, has 5 overarching learning objectives, and students have various opportunities to master these objectives throughout the course. So the table here that you can see lists the learning objectives and then the corresponding course assignments that promote the mastery of these learning objectives. So all aspects of this course are closely aligned with students' learning objectives. So I'll tell you a little bit about the design process for this course. This was my second year teaching the families course, and it was already designed to be very closely aligned with UDL. But because we were formally assessing the course in fall of 2023, we wanted to really improve what was already a pretty accessible and flexible course. So these are the 4 ways that we attempted to do this. So team members adopted, of course, the CAST UDL guidelines. And so these were really reiterated and we kind of nurtured what was already there. We also had a team consultation process where we met as a full team in the spring of 2023. And this included our research assistants on the team, Simon and Rose, who already have a very strong foundation of UDL, a field education coordinator who had knowledge of the student cohort, as well as the applicability to practice settings and the importance of the content, and also a seasoned UDL educator, who is Dr. Tracy Carrier-Smith, a Canadian research chair at Royal Roads University, who provided us with a lot of feedback and consultation. So during this consultation process, we discussed all aspects of the course and made numerous changes and updates. We, of course, used student evaluations from the previous year and kept a lot of things that the students liked. And finally, we used the Enact PTD UDL syllabus rubric. And so this really helped us reflect on the current syllabus design that we had and moving towards adopting strategies where we could better communicate to students and support all of their learners working towards their learning objectives. So I want to share just quickly an implementation example. So here's one example of UDL implementation in the course that uses a learning activity of creating a genogram as an example. So a genogram is a therapeutic tool that we can use to assist us in assessing family functioning over generations. So on the screen here, you'll see there's 6 opportunities that students have to learn how to create a genogram. So we have reading prep and resources on D2L, more so of a formal class lecture where this is recorded and put onto DTL for them. An in-class activity using a realistic case study where I provide one-on-one support, and then we talk about this as a group at the end. And then we revisit the course content the following course using a Kahoot. And this is also a way for me to assess their comprehension. We have journal club activity where students teach us about how to create a genogram with diverse populations and adapt it to the field. And then finally, they have an individual reflective and applied assignment where they are applying the genogram to their own life as a reflective exercise. So these activities are designed in a way that incorporates the UDL CAS guidelines. So unfortunately, I don't have time to go through how each of these match with the principles, but we are able to clearly connect them to the specific principles under each guideline. And then the opportunities and the journey of learning to create these genograms contributes to at least 4 of the learning objectives of the course. So for example, students are learning how to provide feedback and do consultation with peers with the in-class activities and the journal club presentations. And also the assignment contributes to their awareness of social location in professional practice.
Thank you. So one of the challenges with UDL implementation has been how the framework is implemented in a classroom with regards to its 3 principles, 9 guidelines, and then the 31 checkpoints. So at the end of the implementation, we also wanted to assess whether the implementation process aligns with the framework's principles and guidelines. So I'm going to share briefly with you the strategies that we use or how we went about the evaluation process. So we adopted 2 approaches. So the first one is we use what we call the UDL observation measurement tool. This is a measurement tool designed and developed by Dr. James Barsham, a senior advisor at CAST. So 2 observers use the tool. We entered into Dr. Goulden's classroom and then assessed. So the tool kind of provide 4 thematic areas or sections in terms of the assessment or evaluation. So we look at the introduction and then framing of new materials, and then also check the content representation and how it is delivered in class, and then also expression of understanding. And the last aspect is activity and student engagement. So each of these sections has got specific items that you look to compare and see if the implementation or the instructors teaching approaches, class assignment, and the rest, whether they align with the framework's principle. And then the next phase is, one appeal of the framework is it's student focused and it enhances learning achievement. So we also wanted to hear from students. So we adopted questionnaire, individual interviews, and then document analysis, whereby we analyze student class assignment and generated other artifacts to see whether it aligns. So although we are still at the analysis phase, however, our preliminary findings indicates that there are notable benefits with regards to students' learning experiences and then also achievement. So for example, one key notable benefit could be seen within the area of retention of the course content. So although after several weeks of the course, students were able to kind of align or recall and recollect some of the key concepts that they learned in class with regards to the social work course, and they were able to apply them during their practical experiences. Yeah, and then also there was a feeling of belongingness, and then the students had meaningful engagement, which sort of created a vibrant academic community within both the class and then also during their practice. Next. Okay. So this morning, in summary, all that we've done is we've shared with you suggestions for how the framework of universal design can be implemented, and then also ways that faculty can use to evaluate the implementation process to see that it aligns with the principles and then the guidelines. One of the key challenges, as the literature will show, is opportunity for faculty to kind of share their experiences and the rest. So in the next line of action, what we are doing is we've established a UDL community of practice, whereby faculty members, students, and then community members with shared common interests with regards to UDL meet, discuss, and then share their experiences. So we are inviting you, if you want to know more about what we are doing with regards to our work, and then also the community of practice, please, you can check the website or scan these codes. The codes will take you to some of the work that we've already done in a poster form, and then also including the website of our community of practice. Thank you very much for your attention.
So the objectives of our talk is to obviously do it in 10 minutes and to also hopefully you'll develop a better understanding and reflect how student recorded video assessments were experienced by nursing students specifically at Memorial during the COVID-19 pandemic, and hopefully engage in a brief question and answer period to enhance understanding of the implications for the use of student recorded video assessments and emergency planning to inform their teaching and learning practices.
Perfect. So I guess, do you want to be the one to bump through the slides?
I'll touch the buttons.
Okay, you could be the button. You can be our button guy. Thank you. So the purpose for this, again, was understanding that lived experience from the student's perspective. I found actually going through and just doing the analysis really sort of therapeutic. I was kind of surprised what it would be like revisiting that time in our lives.
So we know that Canadian baccalaureate students and instructors had to adjust navigating to online and remote learning due to the pandemic, as many of us did. This prevented nursing students during this time from gaining meaningful psychomotor skills in courses that would generally have been delivered in person. This was problematic for professional healthcare programs, for example, nursing schools, as students expected to learn skills to assess and care for the health of their patients. This teaching is often learned and evaluated in a laboratory to practice and evaluate in-person tactile skills, such as assessing vital signs and body systems. As a result, there was an emphasis on student-recorded video assessment for courses that would generally be delivered in person.
So for our literature review, to save time for today, we're just going to go through the really cut and dry, like down and dirty aspects of the literature. So we have benefits that are reported, such as reduced anxiety with this teaching methodology. We have comparable outcomes when they're measured to in-person evaluations. Limited changes as reported in the literature for feedback. However, we noted some discrepancies with that with our study. Transferability of nursing knowledge to practice is also reported. Improved patient outcomes and improved communication skills. For example, communicating with empathy was something that's in the literature. For some negatives, this was reported on far less likely. And I think maybe sometimes we have a bit of biases towards our approaches, so maybe that's why in the literature. So we noted that there in the literature was increased workload, limitation for manual skills, and social isolation for students. So further details of this are actually available in the atrium in our poster presentation, and we will allow you guys to go through that. Thank you. The methodology and methods that we used. The methodology, we used Van Manen's interpretive phenomenological analysis. Essentially, we're looking at understanding the lived experience.
And for the methods, we had, so as a pilot study, we had 4 students and 2 instructors, both from the Faculty of Nursing. There are 2 other sites, but this one was focused on the Faculty of Nursing. As far as data collection, we received informed consent from all participants, 60 to 90-minute interviews, depending on where it went. And then those interviews were transcribed verbatim.
And so just to clarify as well, we did have HREB approval, and that these were people who were very much embedded with this lived experience. So we think about temporality and time. So these were people who really engaged with student recorded video assessments
for things that would have been done in person. Nursing, we are people. We need to touch people to care for them. That created a huge barrier for us and our faculty. So with the analysis, we looked at reading and rereading the transcriptions. We did line by line coding. We grouped them into sub-themes after going through these interviews and this enriched data from the students and instructors. And we came up with emergent themes, and these were paired with significant statements and validation of the findings with each other as members of the research team, and also with a student and instructor for part of the study participants. And so for our findings, so although there are numerous positives noted in the literature, our findings suggest that nursing students may actually experience inequity because of this teaching and learning method. Concerns issues included things like privacy. So we were recording at the time, students were in their houses. Part of that, again, we look at that temporality, like that time and space. People weren't exactly permitted to leave their homes. So this was during like the height of the pandemic that some of these experiences were reflected upon. And these led to feelings of being vulnerable, and that may be arising from private living arrangements that are exposed on camera. So we also have for theme 1 here. So these are some of the common codes, and I did little snippets of quotes that would just be more easily digested by the audience. So students and instructors in the study reported increased stress and anxiety during periods of the pandemic that required student-recorded videos for psychomotor skills. So this included some cons and negative aspects of student-recorded videos for this. So there were less development of psychomotor skills on like that nice fulsome level that we want students to have. There was a perceived loss of educational experience that would have been given for in-person learning and education of psychomotor skills. Again, privacy concerns in the home, feelings of vulnerability, having their private areas. So for example, student bedrooms recorded. There was uncertainty for length of time that videos were kept from instructors and used after courses. There was also limited to practicing one assessment. So when these were assigned students in person before or now that we're back to like whatever normal is, we have these were a set of psychomotor skills. So as you can imagine, if someone needs their cardiology system assessed, if they need to have their vitals assessed, they need an abdominal assessment done. We have all these different body systems. So students might get an array from like neurology or one of the aforementioned. During this time, they were told 24 hours in advance what specific assessment they would have to do to overcome the technological challenges. So there was, as a result of this, they reported to have more proficiency with that one individual assessment and much less with the others because they just weren't practicing them. So we felt that after talking with the participants, this is actually leading to feeling less self-efficacy and confidence for those psychomotor skills that were not assigned for the student-recorded evaluations, and more research is needed to support this claim. These are now new graduate nurses. These are people who are entering the workforce, and they're not feeling confident from what we've gathered. So inconsistency for students having social support was another key finding. So practice patients were only reported in home environments that had conducive support. So for example, roommates or family members within student bubbles. One student reported this may have actually led to more students withdrawing and pausing their studies at the time. I don't know how or if that data was collected from that perspective, but again, very concerning. We also didn't have anyone in the study who had dropped out for these reasons. So students who did not have this support indicated feeling isolated and less authentic when learning on household items such as teddy bears. There's an increased workload as well that was noted for both instructors and students. For example, students reported re-recording videos on average 4 to 10 times before submitting. So you can imagine where that might be very beneficial for like that one assessment, and then everything else gets left, I don't know where. So other barriers within the student home environments were things like feeling unsafe, background noise and disruptions. There was issues with supportive housing needs. So for example, one instructor disclosed that they had numerous challenges for a student who was living in a shelter at this time. You could imagine the implications that that would have. Yeah. And so also we had again students with isolation, less social supports, reported feeling less prepared for in-person clinicals, less confidence again, and they also felt feeling that they might be perceived as COVID nurses. Other barriers were to consider are barriers to high quality internet at home for our students, limited technological devices, and knowledge for process to record self for evaluations for some participants. There was limited support noted for other students in the cohort as student participants, again with the dropout, and barriers to receiving and applying immediate feedback. So you can imagine if I had a student right here with me and they're going to use their stethoscope, but they don't have it on the correct way, it actually goes in the reverse way you think it would, that's not going to create a good seal for your ears. You are not going to be able to hear cardiac or bowel sounds, which is such a pertinent aspect, or lung sounds. That tells us whether or not a patient is alive and thriving, or oh my dear Lord, we are heading into trouble. Very, very pertinent skills for nurses to have. So I think I'll stop the dropping.
Okay, so we'll go to theme 2 and we'll just, we'll acknowledge that there was a second theme focused on stress leading to adaptation, both from the students and instructors. Some of those common codes, stress, survival, technological issues, adapt, barriers, and strengths. So we'll move into recommendations.
Absolutely. So our recommendations, some of this, again, with it being a small qualitative pilot study, we would want to do some further evidence to support, but we have some general ideas and recommendations to consider. So for example, policies and learning materials need to continue to support educators and students for future and emergency and pandemic planning. So for example, clear policies around deletion of student recorded videos should be included in emergency planning and communicated to students up front. We need to ensure their confidentiality. This ideally should be included in the syllabus. I communicated with CITL and it doesn't sound like we have a very clear policy over retention. So at mine, we have a clear policy for how long minimal. We're supposed to keep these like for a year. But as far as retention goes, that's kind of a gray area with our policy right now. Accommodations for students needing access to space and technology should be included ideally in pandemic and emergency planning. This would benefit both students and instructors. So private spaces for both instructors and students to avail to. This could include something like spaces that promote social distancing. So we have existing spaces here that we could use. We know after SARS, there was really good application of reflection and knowledge for emergency and pandemic planning that happened in South Korea. Their education, from my understanding of that, a lot of it continued. So we have barriers in place by the end of the pandemic that if this were to happen again, or some type of outbreak were to happen again, could we not use these separate rooms with a mannequin, safely disinfect, PPE in between, have a separate room with a monitor, where we can keep education going and maybe provide more immediate feedback with that as a result, help students really keep and improve those skills, that self-efficacy, that confidence that if I'm about to either live or die, I want a nurse to have. And I'm sure we all feel the same way. So also we thought that with the equity, there was implications for that. It would be so nice to see, and when we talked earlier about humanism in the classroom, what kind of barriers do we want to see broken down in 30 years? This really leads into some of our implications. I would love to see barriers to poverty eradicated. Like we want to see students really experiencing equity with their educational experience. So if we could have access to free technology, I came from background in Western University. I started an e-waste technological program there where students can go and take old computers and chargers. We know that they can't afford to go down to Best Buy and spend $500 at the end of the semester if they can't pay for their rent or groceries. So having free access to some technology, if it's through a library or just something that they can rent out, free access to or discounted access to Wi-Fi at home for a student provider discounted rate would be very beneficial from an equitable standpoint. This may help students access quality internet access from home. And for nursing instructors and preceptors, we really do need to be aware that students who receive their education during the COVID pandemic may feel less confident with these skills, and they may require more support in clinical and practice as new graduate nurses. And we also do need to be aware and advocate for policies and procedures for retaining and deleting student recorded video submissions and communicating these upfront with our students. And for future research in this specific area, which it's like I'd be happy to jump on with someone else, but I'm probably not going to NPI anything in this area again on a national level, but you never know. We're looking maybe at confidence level and self-efficacy for new graduate nurses who were educated during this time in their psychomotor skills. So not 100% my area, but if anyone in the room is like interested in talking, collaborating, I think it's something worthwhile. Limitations. So we had a small sample size pilot. We got key emergent themes, but again, when we think about things like temporality, when we look about like how many students we collected and who we collected from, this could look totally different if we talked to 20 students who dropped out because of this, or 20 students who had very favorable socioeconomic like implications and supportive homes. So in conclusion, you know, this is something that we do need to, as much as we want to be very much over the pandemic, I think when it comes to emergency preparedness and when we think about pandemic planning, emergency planning, it is so important to just go back and get those key pieces of learning, apply it so we're more prepared the next time. So when you know what hits the fan, we know what areas we can jump in to avoid it. So this is, I guess, the point in the talk where we will invite you guys. Is there anything that you experienced, whether, you know, it's in the classroom, supporting faculty, even with CITL, our friends, it may be something that you wanted to share? Yes.
Thank you. So we did a similar study during the pandemic and talked about what it was like to teach a certifying program for education in the middle of a pandemic.
Yeah.
And what kind of novel and interesting pandemic pedagogies emerged in our own practice as a result of that. And so the connection to humanizing came from that as well. So I just appreciate that you took the student lens and they looked at what was their experience and how did they navigate those difficult times. So thank you for this research.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to our lightning talk. We'll be talking on innovating bioscience education, flexible open lab sessions for enhanced learning. My name is Ugonna, and under the supervision of Dr. Todd. Welcome. So our objectives, we'll just tell you what open lab sessions is all about, the impact. We've held a pilot study, so we'll just talk about the plans and what we did during our pilot study. And then we'll present the preliminary findings from our pilot study and our future plans for investigating the impact of open lab sessions in additional disciplines.
All right, so one of the things that kind of led us down this road was trying to make our labs a little bit more full with respect to the experiential learning cycle. So when you think about experiential learning, there's a lot of different definitions. Within laboratories, laboratories themselves are considered experiential because they're hands-on. They're actually getting students to engage in some kind of inquiry and carry out an experiment in the case of our department usually, and then reflect on the results. So we tend to hit these first three, like have that experience and then the reflection and maybe in the write-up have that kind of abstraction. But we tend not to hit the fourth one very much. So when we look at what our labs typically are, I know not everybody in the room probably has done lab courses. In science in general, they tend to be very predefined activities. So students will get a we call them kind of cookbook class. So they get instructions that they have to follow. And because we have such tight time constraints in a lot of the labs, there's not a lot of room for them to mess up, and often lab instructors will have like alternative results to throw in if a student does kind of mess something up. So a little bit of a rigid structure and pace. They only have access to the lab for a certain amount of time during that one lab period, and it's very high stakes because this is their one chance to do that lab. By adding in the open lab sessions, our hope was that we could have more flexible access, encourage some exploration of what the students wanted to do and look at or practice more, and actually be able to have that time on task practice of a skill that they're having trouble with, and that they can do it over and over and over and over again if they want to get that mastery.
Yeah, just as Dr. Emi said, adding flexibility in the way of teaching these laboratory courses, the whole teaching will take into account different students' learning needs, interest, style. When we say style, we're talking about learning preferences of students, pace. So in the connecting of what they've been taught in class to real world applications is just making it more flexible for them in taking into account the things that I've just listed. So now somebody will ask, what is the impact of these open lab sessions? It's a form of a flexible experiential learning opportunity. It combines hands-on experience with adaptability from what we said. It's flexible, it's not rigid, like the cookbook method of teaching. And it's student-directed. It can accommodate different, different student learning needs and interests. And based on literature review, it's a form of student-directed learning, just from what I just said as part of the impact of open lab sessions. And it enhances educational objectives, including academic achievements, such as grade, engagement, knowledge retention, and students' personal development, such as self-efficacy, transferable skills, like problem-solving skills, critical thinking skills. So it's actually very impactful from literature review.
So we started off with just a small pilot because we haven't had anybody at Memorial do anything akin to an open lab before.
Yeah.
We have one lab instructor in our department who came from an institution that did kind of lab help centers, which was somewhat along the line of what we wanted to do. So we decided that we would do a little bit of a pilot in one of our own courses. It was a second-year course in QB or biochemistry. It's one of our core courses, so all students have to take it. And it's a little bit of a mix of mostly second-year students, but also some third and fourth-year students because they don't necessarily have to take it in their second year. Overall, there's about 130 students, and in each lab, there's 25 students. So they have labs kind of throughout the week. Each student will have one lab that they had to go to. But it meant that kind of scheduling the open labs became a little bit challenging, trying to find free lab time. Yeah. And I'll note that it's not that we were replacing these labs with the open lab sessions. The open lab sessions were in addition to. And so the additional open lab sessions we did over 9 weeks of the term. So they had a lab at least under their belt before they had access to the open labs. Yeah. We did 4 sessions a week, which were an hour each. So students could come to all 4 if they really wanted to. If they weren't full, mostly, people we'd encourage them to sign up for one. There was no additional formal instruction in the open labs. We did have TAs present to help out with any techniques and to make sure that everything is being done safely. The safety aspect was particularly important. And these were all optional, so we didn't even have bonus marks associated with these for the pilot. So this is just a little bit of a taste of some of the things that we did. So for week 1, for a lot of students coming in, they don't have a lot of advanced lab techniques at this point, and they would have spent their first lab kind of doing and getting used to a bit of pipetting. And so our first open lab was actually pipetting practice. Yeah. So if you don't know what a pipette is, it's the little mechanism that allows you to draw up fluid and then spit it back out into a vial. Yeah. And this is a very psychomotor skill that has to be developed. And a lot of students, when they first come in, they're like this. And, or they might think that they're, taking up the right amount, putting up the right amount, but then when they check it, it's actually different volumes. And so there is a difference in accuracy depending on each individual's technique as well. So when they first came in for that first week, we focused just on pipetting because that was something that they were going to need for the rest of the course. And then as the weeks went on, we built in other activities that they could do. And so we made sure we had, the setups of materials in the lab that they could kind of play around with these things, but they could still always go back to the previous activities. So in the additional weeks, they started to have choice. So if they didn't go to one of the weeks or they felt like, their confidence with the pH meter was still kind of, and they didn't get what they wanted last week, they can still play with them again. And a lot of these techniques are things that would come up over and over again throughout the lab course. So it was of the advantage, it was an advantage for the students to really kind of come and make sure that they were able to do these things in a confident manner.
Okay, this is just a picture of what they did in the first week. This is a pipette art. From the picture, that is not really clear. You see that this other volume is bigger than the other volumes. So the student that did this at the end, she found out that she was not really pipetting the correct volume. And it was a good practice because it helped her to know that there are areas for improvement. So this was what they did practically in the first week. And as the week progressed, as Dr. Todd said, they had options to choose what they wanted to do, right? Okay, so this in this other week, they did what is known as loading gel. And this was a practice that most of them had to request over and over again because it's not an easy practice per se. So
I'll also note that the materials for this are not cheap.
Yeah.
It's nice for them to practice on something that they can actually like destroy and mess up and we don't care.
Yeah.
And then actually do it properly in the lab.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
fantastic.
Okay, let me just try and wrap up. It's almost 9 minutes. Okay, they're still doing the same loading gel. From what I said, it was a practice most of them said they really needed to get used to because most of the time they had this shaky hand while trying to put it in and all. But it really helped them along the way. If this last picture, this is the instructor that was helping out, show them that they can actually take any position that is comfortable for them while putting it in, because most of them didn't have a position that they could just take. Most of them could squat, it was a very difficult thing, but at the end they got the hang of it. But this was the instructor showing them that they can actually use the left hand or a right hand, any hand that is comfortable for them to, practice what they wanted to practice.
Yeah, so obviously we wanted to kind of see how things were going. So we did get ethics approval to do surveys with the students. In this case, we only did one survey at the end. It was a little bit to test out our instrument more than anything and get a little bit of a feel for how it all went. So we measured self-efficacy using an established inventory, student engagement with an established inventory. We asked them about their personal academic goals, that was a self-report, and their academic performance was both a self-report on some aspects, and we also got permission from certain students to collect their final grades at the end. Yeah. We also asked them about any challenges and things that they liked about the open labs, some demographic questions, and for this survey, we asked them to give some feedback on the survey instrument itself. So that's just an example of some of the inventories and what that looks like when I say inventory.
Okay, the researchers' personal observation during the pilot study, we noticed that the schedule didn't really work as the students came only on Thursdays. So the schedule really didn't work as we expected. And the attendance was pretty low. We had about 4 students attend the pilot study, which is not bad. And also in the schedule, sorry, I forgot to put, they attended in the first 5 weeks out of the 9 weeks, which is very good for, for what we were thinking. So the students' outcome, the students were very eager to practice. The 1 hour was too small for them. They wanted to stay more than the 1 hour. They were very eager to practice. They felt less pressured. in the pilot study. And the resources, we noticed that we didn't spend more money on extra materials. We had too many TAs, and there was too much involvement of the lab instructors. And see from the researchers' personal observation, so just from what I said, the schedule conflicts with other sessions, maybe because of some other academic engagements. Maybe that was why the students couldn't make it. And the time that we put it, from what we said before, they have their regular laboratory activities every day, mostly in the afternoons. So we had to choose the morning sessions for this open lab. So maybe the time didn't really work. But from the CEFS reports from our survey, we coded that time constraint was also what the students reported. That was also a reason for not attending. And most of them said they didn't feel they needed the extra practice. They've already had the practice in the first year, laboratory activities and all. And one person said did not want to be in the lab for extra time.
All right, so some of the challenges that came up, I mean, apart from time and trying to get in there, but with the actual being in the open labs themselves, was finding some extra time to prepare or just finding the time itself to come in, and knowing which skill to practice. So it was good that we had kind of preloaded activities that they could choose from. The benefits, hands-on experience, and these were reports from the students that you mentioned, hands-on experience, being able to connect the activities a bit better with course content, ability to practice specific skills that they were having trouble with in particular. A lot of students commented on like a much, stress-free environment that they could just practice and mess up and not worry about that they messed up. And yeah, so that freedom to fail. So we did have some involvement of the lab instructors. They chose to kind of stick around, and it was kind of nice to, the lab instructor just like, we'll just do that and see what happens. Where if you couldn't really normally do that in a lab because it would risk kind of messing up the results. So we just kind of got some of our data back just before this conference, so we haven't had a chance to look at things too much in detail. But we just wanted to throw some of these graphs up here as some of the main things that we would have wanted to look at a little bit more in depth in the study. So this is time spent in lab. So you can't see all the numbers, but these were students who didn't spend any time in the open labs, and then kind of increasing as we go along. And as you can see, like when we look at that time spent in lab with final grades, engagement and self-efficacy, there's not really that much of a difference. But if you look at the final grades, you'll see that one of our big problems is that it's all the A students who participated. Yeah. So yeah, we had a very skewed sample population. If you want to go to the next one. So this is gonna really impact how we do kind of the future work and how we get that study group. I can't remember if I was doing this slide or you.
I think I'm doing it. Okay. So just for our future work, we'll be analyzing the data for the pilot study, and we'll also implement the study for the first year introductory courses in biology and chemistry departments. And we'll make few changes. That's one of the benefits of having a pilot study. So you get the chance to make few changes for any other main study you want to hold. So make few changes. So the pilot study had just one portion of the survey, but in the main study, we'll have a pre and post surveys and changes in the research instruments, and we determine formats to increase participation. As we said, we had a very low attendance, so maybe we can add incentive, something to encourage students to participate more, and that's just it. So the significance of the study.
Yeah, so obviously, I mean, we already talked about it a little bit of it already, but we're hoping that when we look at those first year labs, that eventually we can get to a point where we can tweak the open labs to work in a way that will allow for that increase in self-efficacy that we observed with students who came in like this and then left, no problem at all. Yeah. And that increasing confidence. And the fact that we can do this with TAs, which is a huge not having to use a lot of money for materials, not having to use a lot of money for human resources, because we're all like just with budget cuts at the university all the time. So this would be a really nice way to get a big gain out of a little bit of resources if we can get it to work.
And with that, we just want to thank everyone for listening and to thank the Department of Biochemistry and the participants, the instructors, and just everyone. Thank you.
We're a little bit over time, but
I'm so sorry.
I will dare you. Do we have any questions? Comments? Alrighty, well, thank you everyone for coming out and joining us today. I want to thank all of our presenters. Great job, everyone.